Good afternoon, Council. This is the Council meeting for Monday, June 20th, 2022 at 2 p.m. Councillor Henry in the chair again today, looking first for a roll call, starting down in Ward 1, where I understand there is a big, gigantic rain cloud. Go ahead, Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Councillor Hanmer present.
Councillor Bodley present.
Councillor Veith present.
Councillor Freeman present.
Councillor Vasic here.
Councillor Bonagoy here.
Mayor Jaworski here.
And Councillor Henry here in the chair. So that is all of us. Councillor Henry, I am feeling that vibe today. I did bring my rain gear with me for the ride home between meetings. Okay, next up, we have our territorial acknowledgement, which also coincides with marking National Indigenous Peoples Day. So we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which many of us are gathered today and on which we are broadcasting from today is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous peoples with whom we share this land today. While it is always important to be mindful of the original peoples of this land, it is especially significant at this meeting of Council because tomorrow is National Indigenous Peoples Day. June 21st is a day for all Canadians to recognize and celebrate the unique heritage, diverse cultures, and outstanding contributions of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. While there is much to celebrate, we know that there is still so much work to do to address past harms and move toward building and strengthening the strained and, in some cases, absent relationships between settler and Indigenous peoples. We need to actively challenge and implement changes to the colonial systems that perpetrate these harms, both past and present. As a city, we commit to continuing the work of reconciliation and relationship building with Indigenous peoples, and we commit to building a community where the contributions of Indigenous peoples are welcomed, embraced, and celebrated. And that brings us to our moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we share wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. Next, we have disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Is there any today, Council? I am seeing none, and I am aware of none, so we will move then to the approval of minutes from the May 30th, 2022 Council meeting. Do I have a mover and seconder? I see Councillor Hanmer. It will move that item, and it will be seconded by Mayor Jaworski. We will, if there's no comments on the minutes, we will start the voting down in cloudy Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasic in favor.
Councillor Bonagoy in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. That brings us to staff reports. And the first one up is the 2021 year-end capital report prepared by Kim Reger. We have just a recommendation before us, no presentation. Are there any questions, Council? Seeing none, I will look for a mover and seconder. We have this moved by Councillor Veith and seconded by Mayor Jaworski. I'll note for council and the public, it's always useful to receive these reports to see just the vast number of projects that are ongoing and on the books that staff are dealing with. In 2021, we had an inventory of 341 active projects. And so that is a lot of desk space and mind space taken up by our staff trying to advance these priorities of our community. And I'll pause just to thank them for all of the work that they did in 2021. And I know, as we've seen through reports we are getting already in 2022, that this report won't look as rosy next year, given many of the supply chain challenges and COVID issues and inflation costs that we are seeing. But it was certainly positive to see a number of projects last year that returned on budget and with some surplus funds, which has allowed us to keep going here in 2022. So with that, and with our thanks to staff, I'll start the voting down in Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Counselor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassick in favor.
Councillor Bonagore in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. And that brings us from looking backwards to looking forwards, the 2023 budget strategy. And we have introductory remarks from our CFO, Philippa Reynolds. Go ahead when you are ready, Philippa.
Thank you, Councillor Henry. Thank you to Council for the opportunity to provide a brief introduction here. This report before you on the agenda here is a progress report of the 2023 budget process. As you recall, of course, it's a one-year budget and will be positioned to continue to implement the priorities of Council's existing strategic plan with a measured yet hopeful and progressive approach through four main goals. The first one, support for existing programs and services. Second, operating funding to support new capital assets. Third, continued increased investment in infrastructure renewal. And fourth, service delivery enhancements and additions as supported by the strategic plan, with emphasis on climate change, affordable housing, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. As a lower tier municipality, the City of Waterloo receives 3 cents of every tax dollar. Council's strategic plan provides direction on how we can best spend those 3 cents in order to most benefit the community. In 2022, the City of Waterloo had the 7th lowest tax increase out of the 8 local municipalities. As you know, and as you've referred to just a little while ago there, Councillor Henry, the impact of incredibly high inflation creates challenges for the City of Waterloo on our construction tenders, as well as on the cost of supplies, procurement of goods and services. And like many other municipalities and organizations, private or public, we certainly feel the challenge of a CPI that's nearing 7% and a non-residential construction price index of about 17%. So to meet those 4 goals that I mentioned earlier, the budget committee is developing a budget with a draft property tax increase in the range of 4 to 6% and including budget true-ups and efficiencies to keep that number as low as possible. We'll also develop a menu list for council decision-making as we have in the past. As an update to the report, after finalizing that report a few weeks ago, we continued the work on the public engagement strategy as we had planned. In the report, staff included a preliminary plan to launch a budget-specific Engage Waterloo survey in December for approximately 4 weeks. And if council recalls, in the last budget cycle, there were only 22 responses that were received to the online survey, and this was bothering us. So to gain more valuable input, we plan to leverage the citizen satisfaction phone survey by including budget-related questions there. We believe this will provide more meaningful input, be statistically valid, and reduce survey fatigue by launching only 1 survey instead of 2 back-to-back. It'll take place in November, and outcomes will be provided to council in January to help inform decision-making during that budget process. We'll also be offering in-person and virtual drop-in sessions for members of the public. Details will be ironed out, but these sessions will likely be offered in January. We will also be increasing the accessibility of budget documents and ease of navigating budget information by moving to more HTML web content and bookmarks in documents, to name a few things. These are some of the actions that communications, the EDI team, and finance are working on collaboratively. We've also been working on policy and process updates, and those are covered in the report. On the agenda today, I did also want to just quickly mention before I end my update here that there are 4 tax-based fee reports, and they start right after this particular report we're discussing right now. There isn't a cookie cutter report to approach rather to fee changes, as council knows, though most fees are increasing modestly in the 1% to 2% range to strike a balance between accessibility, reasonable revenue generation, and competitive pricing within the local market, such as the case for recreation services, for example. Some services have increases in the 3% to 5% range, where the high inflation that we just talked about being experienced is also impacting the cost of delivering those services. For the most part, the fees before council today will assist in more closely meeting existing revenue budgets. And the parking rate report, which follows those, is also in today's packet for council's consideration. It is the timing wise is to provide adequate notice for permit holders before the effective date. And the remaining enterprise reports for city utilities, building standards, cemeteries, rental housing, and business licensing will be coming to council in December in order to ensure up-to-date information is included for forecast modeling and the accuracy of budget-related impacts. So that's it for my introduction. Back to you, Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds, for the detailed overview and introduction. I see first question from Mayor Jaworski. Go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Philippa, through the chair. Just on budget 2023, as that's brought up to the then council, I just want to make sure that there's going to be opportunities for the then council to consider new opportunities. New opportunities will be brought to them that won't just be a status quo budget. Just to make sure, because I know there's lots of things in the hopper from staff and management. And I think it would be a missed opportunity that if we didn't make sure that the council of the day has some sort of menu items of things that they could choose from, perhaps. That maybe it might not make it through your range of tax increases, but maybe something that will really strike a fire with the then council.
Through you, Chair Henry, to Mayor Jaworski. Yes, Mayor Jaworski, certainly, as I mentioned, one of the 4 items, the goals of the budget will certainly be service enhancements and additions. And at this point in time, as the Budget Committee deliberates on those and pulling together what those recommended items are, that's one piece that may be certainly in addition to sort of status quo or base and just continuing to deliver what we do. So that those items will be part of the recommended budget. In addition to that, there will also be a menu list that will be published for the new council, of course, to consider and consider adding those as well, if they wish, to the recommended budget pieces that are going to come forward. And as you know, of course, being part of the process for a few years now, there's always also an opportunity for council to raise those that may not even be on the list through the various engagement pieces with council. And so the budget will be released in December, but in January, business plan presentations will be made by each of the areas over the course of 3 meetings. And so that's another opportunity certainly for council to signal any desires to head in a certain direction through those conversations with staff during those meetings as well. So I think between the service enhancements that will be part of the recommended budget. In addition to that will be a menu list for council's consideration above and beyond what's being recommended. And thirdly, through the staff and council engagements over the course of several meetings, that is another opportunity for the new council to also communicate their wishes, and perhaps as well when they receive the outcomes of the citizen satisfaction survey and budget survey that I also mentioned, that could be another opportunity to put those pieces together.
That sounds excellent, Philippa. I think there's a great opportunity if we look at the material that your team put together on the tax increases of 2022. We find ourselves near the near the lowest in the region, and I feel like we really did a lot over this term of council. So I think some of that those wise, more modest investments and bringing them through over a period of years has done wonders for the city of Waterloo. So thank you very much to your team.
Thank you.
Councillor Freeman is next on my list. Go ahead.
Thank you through you, Chair Henry. I noticed that there was a fairly significant, it's kind of, I guess, building on the mayor's question. I noticed that there was a fairly significant range in the CPI versus CPX, and also with regard to the cost of living. And I could be wrong, but the targeted numbers that you're proposing to start the budget planning at, I'm just worried that it's a bit high, because I know that there's talk now about a recession, and I'm just trying to figure out how do we manage changes that we may see between starting this budget planning, and it just seems like inflation's moving a lot it's moving very quickly, and I just wondered if you had some thoughts on that, because I certainly have already started receiving emails from folks where they're getting really concerned about investments and the commitments that their families have made, and that they're looking ahead and they're worried about tax rates.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Freeman. That is obviously a very valid concern and a great question. By policy, what staff use as a guideline based on council approved policy is the CPIX average rolling 12-month, which at this present moment in time is 3.98%, so just a little bit under 4. That is used to guide base budget decisions, so not the increased investment in infrastructure or the service enhancements that we were just talking about a little bit earlier. That is to continue to deliver the services and programs that folks are accustomed to receiving, as well as continuing to expand for the purposes of growth, in terms of making sure that if we're building new facilities or new assets, that we're able to maintain those and offer the programming that's required, as an example. So that is what's sort of guiding that lower part of the range, in and around the 4% range, Councillor Freeman. And staff is very much making sure that we're taking that into account, and as I said, including budget true-ups, where perhaps our actual revenue has been coming in on certain areas that over exceeding our budget, and making sure that we're taking those opportunities if they're sustainable, and other efficiencies, which we'll be reporting to council on in December as well, once we get a little closer to that time frame. But absolutely, we're looking at not just selecting obviously the highest inflation number and using that as our basis. No, we're looking at the CPIX 12-month rolling, which tends to be more conservative. As you can see, it tends to, the CPIX itself removes the most volatile items from the inflation calculations. So that is somewhat helpful, of course. But what will happen in 2023 and how, you know, economies and global economies will proceed is obviously very difficult and challenging to know. We're looking at, you know, what forecasts are saying. We're looking to be as conservative as we can and still move forward on these important pieces that council has prioritized within the strategic plan so that we can continue to make progress on that front, while also at the same time balancing you know, affordability and taking those pieces into account.
Thank you. I guess I was thinking, like, I think the number that you mentioned earlier was the 3.9% plus the 1% that was included in this past budget as it related to infrastructure reinvestment. And I guess what I'm just making sure that I understand is whether or not we can be nimble enough that if that average rolling 12-month CPIX should take a bit of a dive, that there'll be a toolkit to say, here's the areas in the budget that council can consider making changes to bring it down to the new average rolling 12-month number, for example.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. I would say that yes, through our menu list, that I think has proven in the last few budget cycles to be helpful to council if they wish to make changes to what is being recommended. And that is one avenue that we can accomplish that. And if council feels that, you know, there needs to be some tweaks to that final number, that could be an effective way to do so, including if that infrastructure piece is part of that conversation. That's obviously a decision point for sure for council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to building on this as a note, and Philippa, perhaps it would be you know, helpful when the budget comes forward that there's some discussion paper or whatever we're calling those generally on inflation, you know, and its impact on particularly including on capital as well, since we've got the construction price index changes, and just going back a little bit to pre-pandemic and walking sort of those rate changes and the cumulative effect of those changes through the budget cycles. Because I know that we had a drop in a number of these numbers before we had a large increase. And so I think it will be helpful to put some of those things in context, especially noting that staff are allocating sort of tentatively 5.2% on the capital side to deal with construction inflation, knowing that we're currently at 17 in terms of the numbers. So we take one step ahead to go two steps back, which is going to be challenging. So I think some of that context in a discussion paper will help the new council wrap their head around where we've been and where we're going, and putting the city policy and some of the pressures from that in context for the new council. I see Councillor Bonagor up next.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Henry. Thank you to all the staff who've been working so hard on all of this. It's very difficult to kind of peer into the future right now, as Councillor Freeman was alluding to. I'm just kind of putting myself into the shoes of people who'll be sitting around the table when this comes up for decisions in the new year. And there's going to be, I mean, we all know there's going to be really difficult decisions ahead. So I'm hoping just to find out, and I hate to be the one to ask this, but, you know, at the moment it looks like, you know, we talk about the base budget, we talk about the recommendations and the business plans, we talk about the menu items if people want to, if council wishes to go above and beyond. Council might also be looking for places to cut back. They might be looking for places to slow down. They might be looking for places where budgets can be static or shrink if necessary in order to find that balance to meet new strategic priorities. And I recognize that that is a hugely difficult conversation, but I'm just wondering, will there be some kind of discussion paper or menu item or balancing workshop just to help new councillors understand the tools at their disposal and to help them work through how how the city can potentially find a new balance should they need to.
Through you, Councillor Henry, to Councillor Bonagor. I would say that on the education front, and just in terms of getting new councillors up to speed and be able to answer some of their questions, leading into the budget process, I'm hopeful that we can develop council orientation that will be successful in that regard. However, as you say, going through the process of sort of rationalizing and analyzing programs, services, is a pretty challenging process. We have done this in the past over a number of years. Historically, they've resulted in little to no change, I would say. And that's often, I think, because services are either legislated, or if they're not legislated, they're often very valued by groups of people. However, having said that, program reviews, even though they're significant in terms of resources and time, staff can certainly embark on that if council directs staff to do so, for sure. In the meantime, as I mentioned a little earlier, we're absolutely building in budget true-ups to keep those tax impacts as low as possible and efficiencies. And there's a spirit of continuous improvement at the city, various efficiencies that staff have developed in the last couple of years, some of them that have come out of the pandemic, and others that, regardless of that, were in the works. But these will be communicated to council in December as well as part of the budget release. And hopefully that will also help some of the new members kind of get their heads around, what's being done. Now, I mean, these efficiencies, big and small, don't always result in budget reductions. Collectively, they can have a significant impact on things like, building capacity and cost avoidance, or even reducing what we're paying, for example, for something, which is helpful, but it doesn't necessarily always bring down the budget impact, which I think is more to what you're referring to. So we will certainly provide that. Another piece is the capital side. Deferring a project or two typically it won't impact the tax increase, because it's just not a significant enough impact for a one-time project or two to have on an ongoing, persistent, permanent manner that the tax increases. But the budget committee is looking at how our capital program can focus on doing perhaps a little less, but doing what we do better, so that we can take price escalation into account, repair what we have while still expanding the program, but perhaps at a slightly lower rate in order to balance to those financial constraints. And so this is something we're discussing and reviewing and hope to bring forward to council as part of the budget process. So that will be a piece certainly for decision making. And then I would say that the menu list may have some opportunities there for council to choose to make a bit of a different decision, as well as the infrastructure levy or the infrastructure investment, and not necessarily we're putting forward what staff's recommendation is, but there's always an opportunity for council to decide they feel they need to ease up on that a little bit. It will take a bit more time, but that's I would say, a lever as well. So those are some various thoughts there, and welcome more feedback on that.
No, I just really appreciate that you've all already started to put so much thought into it. And, as you said, I mean, these things may not end up in budget reductions. It may just be a question of finding balance. But I just thank you for already having all of that sort of in your collective mind at the moment. And I that's all from me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's all the questions I see from council on my board. And Felipe, you heard my note and hope on some guidance for new council. Certainly, it's going to be challenging times ahead, but we'd expect nothing less in this period of extreme global volatility. Certainly, the effects of inflation and the impacts of uneven recoveries through COVID are being felt not just locally or in Ontario or in Canada, but indeed in all of the major countries around the world. We are seeing different but still high challenging levels of inflation, and it's something that we're not used to. I think, and so there's been a lot of thought that we have to play into how we balance trying to achieve elements of our strategic plan by moving forward versus protecting the gains that we've made and not have inflation erode the investments that this council has worked so hard to make to advance public priorities during these difficult years. So it is going to be a tall order, and there are certainly some big shoes to fill around this table, and I wish the new council well on chewing through these difficult problems with a very capable and thoughtful staff to support them in that endeavor. So with that, I just need approval of the recommendation that we received, the stuff that we received and have talked about. So we'll look for a move by Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Bonagor, and we'll take the vote starting down in Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. Now we are on to a number of fees and charges for 2023, starting with the Economic Development Division. None of these are coming with presentations, so staff are just available to respond to questions. Are there any questions for economic development? Seeing none, I'll look for a mover and seconder, and then we'll take a vote. Moved by Councillor Vassic, seconded by Councillor Bodley, and we'll go back down to Ward 1 to start the vote.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
The chair is in favor, so that carries. Next up, we have corporate services. Any questions for the corporate services team? I see Councillor Freeman moving this item. And I see, I'll take Councillor Veith to second the item. We have no questions, so we'll start the vote. This time I'll say up in Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries as well. Next up, we have the community services fees and charges. And it is an extensive sheet. Are there any questions from council? I'm not seeing questions, so I'll look to, okay, so I have Councillor Hanmer to move it, Councillor Veith to second it, and we'll go to Councillor Hanmer for a comment, and then she can start the vote when she is done.
Thank you, Chair, through you. I just wanted to comment, and it's an appreciation for staff, not just in community services, but in all of our divisions, who have really taken a hard look to try to make sure that our fees are reasonable for people to begin engaging again. So in community services, having our participation increase, or enabling people to participate in city activities and removing all those barriers, and yet being realistic with the things like fuel costs that we have to do as a transfer. So I just wanted to make sure that we're acknowledging and recognizing the contribution that staff have made this way in pulling all of these reports together regarding the fees for next year. And I will vote in favor of the community services fees and changes.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassick in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. Thank you for those comments, Councillor Hanmer. Certainly the teams do a heck of a lot of work to be able to model these. And I'll flag for the public as we go through these items, there are a number of these for which there's a modest fee increase, but it's not going to result in a budget impact, as we are recognizing some of the volumes have changed and some of the costs have changed over this time. And so it becomes more recovery and absorbing that pressure. And so it doesn't become a broader pressure to the base budget by doing this fee change, rather than have that need to be absorbed where it can't be absorbed anymore. So next up, we have IPPW 2023 fees and charges. Are there any questions from council? I don't see any from other councillors. I had, I'm going to call it a comment kind of masquerading as a question for you, Ron, or one of your team looking at this. When I, not for this year, but when I look at, and I've said this in the past, when I look at the road occupancy, charges for folks that, as a result of their project, they need to occupy part of our public right-of-way, that we have a significantly different fee structure in place for occupying the vehicular travel portion of the road and for sidewalks. And I was wondering if the team, in light of our transportation master plan and our broader goals around this, could, for a future fee report in a subsequent year, take another look at that aspect and see if we might better balance those, so that we are respecting all modes of transport and how people get across our city, and are providing reasonable recovery, so there isn't an incentive, a much larger incentive, to close active transportation facilities rather than vehicular transportation facilities arising from our fee structure.
Thank you, Chair Henry, for that excellent question. And yes, I think part of the logic and the way the fee structure is broken down here is because oftentimes, if there is a constructor who's occupying the sidewalk, they're already paying for that road occupancy permit for the traveled portion of the right-of-way first. But there are circumstances where that's not the case, as you point out, and I think that's certainly fair for us to look at sort of the equity and the fairness between those two types of road occupancy permits. So we can certainly take that away, and our transportation team can review it for the next iteration. Thanks for your question.
I appreciate that, Commissioner, and I know there are a few things I find as frustrating walking through the city is when you find a sidewalk closed, and particularly when folks, not everybody who occupies our public right-of-way understand where signs need to be so that the public can have a safe way of getting around those things. This is more often a problem on regional roads, but it can be on ours as well. So I appreciate the team taking a look at this. I'm not seeing any other comments or questions from council on this item, so I'll look for a mover and seconder. I see Councillor Bonagor moving this item, and I'll take Councillor Vasek seconding this item, and we'll start the voting. This time I'll say over in Ward 1.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Favor.
Councillor Vasek in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. That takes us to our last fee report for today, and that's the 2023 parking rates. Are there questions from council on the parking rate report? I am not seeing any, so we'll look for a mover and seconder on this item. Moved by Councillor Veith. Seconded by Mayor Jaworski. Before I call the vote, I'll just ask, and this can be done offline, if Chris Hetman, if you could just send me a copy of the 2021 parking utilization study. I saw it referenced in this report, but I think it was done after the report the prior year, and I'm just curious, knowing that that's being done. So if you could circulate that, I'd appreciate the chance to take a look. So I'll start the vote over in Ward 1 again.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vasek in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor, so that carries. Last item on this afternoon's agenda is the 2021 Census Release 2 information report, which is a lot of good data. Are there any questions, Council? Tanya, is there anything you wanted to highlight for us that was of interest in this particular data release?
Through you, Chair Henry, to Council. Very interesting, as the data is released, to see the changes since the last census in 2016. And on our end, Torin and myself, we are looking forward to data releases to be able to provide Council with a more fulsome and comprehensive package of information about our residents in the city of Waterloo. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say that.
And I appreciate you doing the work. I know that you and the team and Torin doing the work, because certainly understand how our city is growing and changing are critical for us to be able to plan and understand the changing needs of our community. I see Councillor Bonagor also has a comment, so I will defer to her. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Henry. I think I was just going to say something similar to what you just did. I just wanted to let staff know that I always really appreciate these reports, and I think that the census is always so fascinating because it helps us understand or it places us in a context both within the region, within the province, and within the country. And I always love diving down deep into it, and I very much appreciated all of the information that Council, that staff brought to Council on this one. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Councillor Bonagor. We really appreciate the feedback.
Yes, and I can always tell when it is census data dump day, because the next day I get a call from Jeff Outett looking to write a story, who's already done some of this work. So it's useful that we are doing our own detailed review and work internally as well on this. So I just need approval of the recommendation that we receive this information. So I see Councillor Hanmer moving this, and I also saw Councillor Bonagor moving it. So I guess I'll take Councillor Hanmer, seconded by Councillor Bonagor, and then we'll go back to Councillor Hanmer to start the vote.
Councillor Hanmer in favor.
Councillor Bodley in favor.
Councillor Veith in favor.
Councillor Freeman in favor.
Councillor Vassic in favor.
Councillor Bonagor in favor.
Mayor Jaworski in favor.
And the chair is in favor as well. That concludes the afternoon agenda, which means that we will recess and reconvene at 6:30. So please, council, sign back into the meeting for sound checks by about 6:15. That would be helpful as we set up for the evening. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon looking at what's going on outside. And we'll see you back at 6:30.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.